The joint meeting of the City of St. Pete Beach. It is 4 p.m. on Tuesday, July 11th, 2023. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, if you'll please do the roll call.
Vice Mayor Grill.
Here.
Commissioner Frzlowski.
Here.
Commissioner Marone.
Here.
Member Marriott.
Here.
Member Resnicki.
Here.
Member Welch.
Here.
Vice Chair Kurzman is present via Zoom. Chair Rothenberger.
Here.
And Mayor Petrilla.
Here. All right. City Attorney, do you remember where we left off?
Yeah, I think the city manager is going to start us off.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, members of the Beach Stewardship Committee. I know there is, we got a little bit of an hour of time allocated to do this afternoon. So I just wanted to throw in a suggestion for the commission and the committee is that we limit today the discussion on policy level items and anything that really has to do with specific wording as to how do you say it, whether an item is in one place or two places, that it really is something that can be delegated to the city attorney. City staff will then review that to make sure that the language is clear and concise. But given the limited amount of time and and if we really want to just complete this, just keep it at a high level, make decisions at that policy level, and I think that will get us a lot quicker to the end goal. So that's my suggestion for the group. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager.
So, yes, thank you, Mayor. We did leave off at 95.7 based on the meeting minutes on the agenda. But if we want, I think there was, I don't know if we want to go down the line of commissioners and say, okay, these are the things I'd like to see addressed, or if you still want to move section by section. But I do agree with the city manager in that making the best use of our time is probably talking about high-level policy decisions that me and staff and Andrew can work together and draft to encompass what the commission wants, and then bring that forward fully written at the time of first reading.
Well, I certainly agree with that approach. I mean, yes, absolutely. I think we got a little sidetracked into wording and sections and what's written here, what's written there, where I don't feel we're, excuse me, that we are concluded or in agreement on certain policy items.
One of the policies is glaring, and it's been brought up by residents, brought up by hotels, it's been brought up in this last meeting, and I think we need to get to a final place on it, and that is whether or not we're gonna have the hotels be required to take everything off the beach every day and bring everything back out the next day. However I worded that is trying to word it as very simply as possible, but it just seems like one of the biggest issues that we need resolution on, and I think that may be something we can work on today and see if we can get it closer to a final decision.
I would agree, and that's right at 95.7 where we kind of left off. So
Correct. Now for the resorts, there is a transient lodging section as well, but yeah, it's a perfect segue. 95.7. So not to reiterate, but go ahead.
So I'll maybe give some thoughts.
I was just about to pose the question that he asked.
Yeah. So it's I mean, unless you want to jump in.
No, go ahead.
Because I've been thinking about this a lot, because it is a big issue, and it's an issue for residents, an issue for hoteliers. I've been walking up and down the beach like I'm sure a lot of you have been doing, taking a look at it, talking with people, and I understand, both sides, the resident side as well as the hotelier side. One of the things that beyond the turtle issue, the complaint that I typically get from residents is that when there is probably more in terms of a narrow beach, when an owner has a narrow beach and they have it packed with cabanas, it doesn't feel comfortable for a resident to go down and sit down. If you look at those if you walk around. And so what people end up doing then is going to the left or the right, north or south, and then causing an issue with neighboring properties. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do it. You know, I think we went to that side where we said, okay, just remove them all. And that wasn't just for turtles, that was part of dealing with that issue. But there were other, I think Jennifer, other staff members had ideas before, if everybody remembers. There was a way of saying there's a limit, you have to have some side yard, you know, setbacks from the side, setback from the beach, and then I forget how the formula got worked out. There was
Density, yeah.
There's a density formula, so that's one way to look at it. I understand from hoteliers, especially the cabanas that have the, I think they use like a rebar that, you know, they probably put in the ground 3 feet to keep it from tumbling, because if the wind comes, it'll tumble those things. So, you know, I don't know what the best solution is. One of the things that I was thinking, it appears to me it's more when you have the narrow properties, because the bigger the property is, it doesn't really affect the neighbors as much. So another way I was thinking of, I don't know if it's the best idea, would be to set a limit of, like, if you have less than 200 feet wide, then you have to remove them, because it's not that many to put out there to deal with it. And if you can't deal with cabanas, maybe it's just umbrellas and chairs. I mean, I've been on a lot of beaches where they don't have them set up ahead of time. They have them where they grab 2 chairs and an umbrella, they've got an electric drill to go down, drill it, and stick it in the sand. I know for some of the larger resorts, that's much more of a challenge. So we need to do something about it. So, but I want to kind of express the reason why we've been bringing it up. Maybe there may be other reasons, but that was one of the things that we as I brought up and others brought up, and so that was part of the reason for doing it. So I wanted to just make that clear, because we've read a lot of emails, and some of it went from turtles to other things. Well, we've been talking about a lot of different things.
Well, and to that point, I think there's really 2 issues in there. Pushing people, when people have to go to the north or south, then let's call the elephant in the room. Who can sit where on the beach, on what part of the beach? And that problem just gets exacerbated by people having to go north and south.
Yeah. The other thing, this is maybe related, maybe not, but I know we've been getting a lot of emails, and there's a lot of views on it and some misconceptions that, and I know the city's been working, I don't know where we're at in terms of surveys of the property, but it seems to me a majority of the beach is privately owned, and it's privately owned by residents. When you think about the northern end, the Silver Sands owns that beach in front of them. I think almost every condo owns the beach in front of them. I know hotels do too, all the way down to the Don Cesar blocks. M&N is owned by the residents. So there's sometimes a misconception that it's only hotels. We have a lot of residents that technically own the beach sand.
Yeah, if I may address that point, we currently have about 80% of surveys for all the properties that are on Gulf. And in generally, while the boundaries move up and down, depending on the properties, most properties are going to the high water mark.
Okay.
Yes.
So here's something I want to distinguish. The private property, the hotel property, and then Upham and Paso Grill. I flat out think that Upham and Paso Grill, where we are sharing, the city is profit sharing in the 2 to 3 block, or in Paso Grill, umbrellas, cabanas.
Also the Dolphin.
Excuse me?
Also the Dolphin.
With the county park.
With the county park.
Yeah.
As of last week, as the last commission meeting, we now.
Okay, I wasn't here, so I didn't know that we were getting, so, but most importantly in those 2 areas, especially in Paso Grill, where the beach is so short from the Paradise Grill north, I don't think that any cabanas or chairs should be put out until they're fully rented by someone, because they're setting them up, you're sitting behind them, you can't see the beach, and they're taking up basically 2.5 blocks of property while they're waiting for people to come in. So I think, go ahead, Michael.
I was down there the other day, and they're not doing this. They're going over, they are
guessing that that's what we're wanting, and they're doing it now. They're not stacking that place up full.
And that may be great. It didn't happen on 4th of July because I was out there. But regardless of whether they're doing it because in anticipation of it, I think it needs to be in an ordinance.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Yeah, right.
But should we be working on the strategic versus the tactical? I mean, this is a tactical shorter term issue that we need to address absolutely for Paso Grill.
Yes.
That there's no beach. We put up cabana, but once there's renourishment, knock on wood, it comes soon, that we'll have a quote, a normal beach and back to normal. So
If I may.
we need the ordinance.
You don't need to address that in the ordinance because you control that in the contract.
Okay.
You have absolute control of that in the contract. That contract is coming up for renewal in about 2 months.
So we can slide that to the side.
And you can basically tell the contractor exactly what you want. You can say, I don't want any chairs or umbrellas in this area. So you have absolute discretion on those 3 areas through your contract.
So now we can
Okay,
shorten it.
just want.
But I appreciate that, yeah.
And we did
Member Welch?
assume the county beach.
Okay.
So now we control the concessions.
Sorry, Member Welch.
We need to keep in mind that it's a totally separate situation. The cabana situation in Paso Grill and the concessions are totally different than the cabana situations at the hotels. They're different operations, they're different. Nobody is getting those with their room. A lot of the hotels rent a room with a cabana. So I rent a room that's got a cabana. I want it there in the morning and I want it at sunset and every time in between.
Member Merritt?
Would it be possible?
We see you, John.
Would it be possible to get to discuss the issue of density of chairs on the beach and pushing people to neighboring properties separately from the pulling everything up off the beach at night? Because it seems to me that those are 2 separate issues. Because I don't think anybody's going to the beach at midnight and going, dang it, all these chairs are in my way, I don't have anywhere to sit.
But if you have a density formula, then the density formula could take into consideration what can stay and what can't stay every night. So you may have, let's just say, 100 out during the day, but based on your density formula, you've got to bring in 20 of them. And the 20 can't be exceeding certain setbacks.
Is there is the thought process behind having things brought up off the beach? So if you put yourself in the position of one of the guys that's running the chairs behind the hotel, is the purpose of bringing them up off the beach to try to have them not back there the next day? Or is the purpose, what is the purpose of pulling them up off the beach?
Well, I think it's beyond the turtle issue, so I'll let somebody else address the turtle issue. The thought was that when they pack them on the beach, then they're negatively affecting neighbors. So I think Commissioner Roan said it correctly that if we solve the density issue, if we solve the issue of not negatively affecting your neighbors, I don't know that there's a problem with leaving them overnight, which is what the hoteliers are asking about. So I'm trying to kind of get to what were the reasons why we were doing this in the first place, and then whoever comes up with the best idea to solve that issue, then maybe that's an acceptable solution. I think in frustration, or just sort of an immediate way of solving it was, okay, don't put them out there until they're being used. Because I've seen, I think probably a lot of you have seen, it seems like some of them are out there and never being used.
Yeah.
At least in some areas. I mean, I'm not totally up and down a beach. I'm more familiar, obviously, with District 3, because that's the easiest place for me to walk up and down. I walk up and down the beach. But, I mean, there are some that I could swear as the day goes by, and maybe half of them are being used.
Member Kurtzman?
Yes. So I think right from the start, when we started discussing this today, there was a comment that we're talking about 95.7, and when we started referring to the term cabanas, the definition of cabanas in our ordinance is a structure that's where we're selling alcohol. So right off the bat, there's, I think, almost confusion because to many people, we really want to be talking about the structures and the chairs, even when we're not selling alcohol. I think many people today are probably thinking we're talking about chairs and everything else, but cabanas, by definition, is cabanas where we're selling alcohol. So just to take a step back, I think we really want to be talking about public beaches policy, because we're setting the policy in the workshop, those are the ones where we could say, let's not be pushing people to other beaches, and that's been a problem. And then the second thing is, how do we get where we were? And that is that originally when workshops were happening, originally there was a thought that there was an ordinance in place that said it was not being enforced. It said that hotels and other entities already had to bring in chairs at night. We just weren't making them do it. And so when there was a choice in hand to decide, should we have the hotels start to bring them in like they had to, or should we do a density calculation? People said, oh, well, since we already have this rule in place, let's start enforcing it. I think we made it, that the decision was made, not necessarily by everybody here today, to go with what was already on the books. I think that's how we got where we were, and I think that's why maybe there can be a step back based on feedback that's been coming in, or to look at this trash with fresh eyes to say what is best. Should we go with the density calculation? What can we do if we take the public beaches out of the equation, Upland, Dolphin, Paso Grill, and now say, what do you do for all the hotels that already have their chairs, all the other entities? What is the best way to make it so that, because here too, we do see many of these hotels do have chairs that sit there empty all day and are pushing their guests. And people at those beaches are being pushed to other private properties, other beaches, for no reason. How do we make it though that isn't happening too? And look at that trash. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would just like to clarify on 95.7B, where it states cabanas. I don't know if I got a chance to say this last time, but I was going to have that amended to say cabanas, umbrellas, or chairs, not just strictly cabanas, because the whole idea is anything that physically goes out there. So I just forgot to put that out there in terms of definitions.
Yes, I did note that, and I do want to clarify for the public. Member Kurtzman is correct. If you look at Chapter 94, currently, no chair, bench, table, or umbrella shall remain on the beach or shall be allowed to remain on the beach between sunset and sunrise. So it's not a new thing, this whole conversation. It's just the enforcement of it that's kind of been not the best, right? But I did want to make that clear. And I do think with density, you can also create buffers, right? So you have to be 75 feet from a beach access point. You have to be 50 feet from the wet sand, so you can start packing these things back a little bit. And then once you get the density as well, then you're creating kind of a site plan in a way based on the language in the ordinance.
So we're 20 minutes in. I don't know if we've really gotten anywhere, or I don't even know what we're if we can take care of, if we...
Did you just say that Chapter 94 says they need to go in, but only on the public beaches, correct?
That's what the code says, correct?
Only public, yeah, okay.
So if we can take care of the vendor that we own from a contractual space, that's great. So we don't need to focus on that. Let's focus on what, again, back to the question. What are we going to, if this is the first topic we're going to tackle, what are we going to do about structures on the beach, or chairs, cabanas, whatever the proper title is?
I think we should allow them to leave them out there overnight with a restriction based on density and a buffer. I don't know the formula, though.
I don't know that you can necessarily just look at density or, as you mentioned, width, because you have, for example, from 55th all the way up past PCI, there's nothing. There's no, it's all one row of a mile of cabanas, contiguous, no stops. And they keep migrating closer and closer to the water. We're adding additional rows.
That's what I'm saying, is the buffer would bring them in, and bring them in.
But where's the buffer? Is it based on the current assemblage? Is it based on, hey, we're going to put all these properties together and now...
Based on lot lines, property lines, I think.
Current lot lines, or lot lines when they assemble a bunch of properties?
Well,
I think that's what we've got to figure out. To me, it was an alternative to just saying remove them all. So again, I don't know exactly what it was. I know there was an earlier idea to think of it with certain dimensions, and I remember, if I remember correctly, it was side yard setbacks for property lines, it was from the water, and then it was a certain contained area.
Right, and so each chair, umbrella, cabana, whatever, there was also space that had to be between it. So it was the max number you could go widthwise and the max that you could go lengthwise. So kind of what you were talking about, the smaller the property, the less you would have on there because you just have less space.
Right.
So Matthew, if we enacted an ordinance today, let's just hypothetically, that addressed buffer zones, which means tiering things, bringing things in from certain boundaries of the property lot lines, bringing them in from the water a certain distance, and then subsequent to that enactment of the ordinance, a commercial hotelier property wanted to subdivide that property into different lots, how would that affect the application of the ordinance to that property? Is there a way that we can put something in the ordinance that says that this is enacted on such and such a date, any properties that change their lot lines subject to this ordinance, after that will be subject to the new buffer where they don't have to bring it in X amount of feet from their new lot lines?
I think it's
Is there a way to
twofold.
do
Well,
that?
There is a way to do it, but I'm also thinking of, if someone's replatting it, I believe it requires commission approval anyways, right? So it wouldn't just happen without you guys being somewhat involved in what they're trying to do to actually change the plat lines of pre-platted subdivisions.
Are you sure that because
If they're
Coral Reef
replatted,
replatted
Yeah.
to 3 lots, I don't think it came before the commission. I think they went to the county to get it replatted.
so lot combination and lot splitting is different than actually amending a plat. Right, and actually replatting something that's currently there. So whether they consolidated things or split things, that's fine, but if they're removing lot lines and creating, let's assume, 3 separate properties that are now one contiguous box, that requires a replat, which is approved by the commission.
Okay.
So there is lot consolidations, right, unity of titles and other mechanisms to do that, but they're not actually changing the plat lines on the subdivision.
I just don't want to go down, as the mayor mentioned, go down a road and then we can't address that issue. And seems like there ends up being a workaround. I'd like to avoid workarounds.
Understood.
I would want it to probably stay within the lines of the comprehensive plan, so if lots were combined, they would still have to stay within the buffers of their original lot lines. So if like you had 3 lots, they still would be separate. So even if you combine them, you wouldn't then become some giant monolith. You would still have separate buffers within your original 3 lots.
So to move this to move this
These are minor points that you can discuss later.
right, I think let's go back to the conceptual item. We want to limit and put in some sort of density, and then we need to make sure that we address any unintended loophole that might be put in here by somebody combining lots, et cetera, to get around limits that have been put in.
City Manager, since you're here, do you know if we have a report on the current usage for the properties that are on the beach today and how many cabanas or chairs they have vis-a-vis how many rooms they have?
No, we don't. We could try to put that together in coordination with the hotels, but we don't have that information.
I think we got a report from
the chamber.
I think we got a
Yeah, oh,
report
from the,
from the
I think
chamber,
they
from the
send you
chamber, and then
something,
someone
right,
else
yes,
sent the
true.
same spreadsheet to us.
Yeah.
I don't think it goes to the number of rooms, but there is a spreadsheet. I think Robin Miller, who I think is here, from the chamber, sent this to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But what I want to add was there are ways to deal with the problem that you're seeing. One is basically create a buffer so each beach access point has a buffer. And as you know, new hotels are getting approved and new development is getting approved, there will be more beach access points. So you can say, there's going to be a buffer of 50 feet from the center line of a beach access point. The other way to do it is basically that every it's every 250 feet or every 300 feet, you have to create a buffer zone. So there are ways to break that long stretch of ownership by rules. So I'm just giving examples. I think the problem is solvable once you make the policy, Commissioner.
And I would, sorry.
I like the latter idea only because I just use the county parks in my district, and you know, I go walk by it all the time, and it's a popular beach. If you drive by, it's on a nice beach day, it's always packed. You can't get a parking spot there. I'm not sure how much the Sunrunner affects it or not, but I'm sure some people are riding that. So even without cabanas there, I would say that will be an issue where people are filtering north and south from that area. That's just one area that, to me, is one of the most congested. I know there are probably some areas more in the northern part where some of the hotels more further up. So I know we got emails from Silver Sands and that. But I do kind of like that idea of it, not just buffers at access points, but in other strategic locations.
Member Marriott, then Member Resnicki.
I just have a concern that, you know, having a buffer zone at beach access points makes a lot more sense to me than having, you know, if you have a stretch of hotels with no beach access, where it's a very long way for someone who's not staying at the hotel to get there. It seems pretty, you know, not like a super reasonable ask of the hotels to make them have buffer zones at property lines that are farther than anyone's likely to walk. But my other concern is that if, you know, like the Silver Sands, where they have their beach roped off, where no one can access it, and I don't know that they're required to have a buffer zone. We don't have it next to
Yeah, so if I may, well, hold on, please. I mean, the Silver Sands issue was resolved
Correct.
to the, I'll call it, walking to the west, to the second dunes, and west of the second set of dunes has been deemed to be public or sorted out, and the public is accessing that. So there really is no issue.
So it's just the dunes that are roped off.
It's where their erosion control line ends, which I have the map, but it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
So when you come out, it kind of comes down and then it comes a little bit up to the dunes, and that's where their property line ends.
So while in the past that may have been an issue, it's that particular.
But so any hotel that wanted to do that could as well, correct? They could, down to their erosion control line, could keep the public off of it altogether, regardless of any buffer zone, correct? Or
Not every.
would everybody have to?
Erosion control lines are established when there's beach renourishment.
Okay.
And we haven't had beach renourishment in the entire beach. I mean, it would have been awesome if that was the case, because then everything would be public. But I don't want to opine on whether or not resorts can kick people off, because I don't think the statute's very clear.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing I want to occur after this meeting.
Well, and that's a completely different
It is a completely
discussion that
different.
we
not a
do need
discussion
to
that we-
address, but not
Correct.
for.
Not here.
But I will say, to your point, if 3 parcels, assuming they unify, our comp plan requires beach access points, so they would be required to have 3 beach access points, which then turns to the buffer.
Right.
And you can make it as wide or as narrow as you want, but there would be space based on these buffers because of the beach access points that were required via our comp plan.
Member Resnicki.
Some of it was kind of discussed, but again, the purpose, right? What are we trying to do? We're trying to preserve the beach. At least that's what I believe, right? And I know we're going into a lot of detail, but what do we want it to look like? I agree with the density. I think hotels.
You just said 2 things. You said preserve the beach and what we want it to look like.
What we want it to look like. When you calculate density, I don't know what the number is, right? If you're looking to reduce trash, protect flora, protect fauna, protect the barrier island, protect the safety and health of the neighbors or everybody, people who are complaining that my neighbor is, you know, coming towards my side, let's just say, or, you know, or invading my space, or I'm hearing, we already know there's an issue enforcing a lot of things, the dogs, the drugs, the alcohol, you know, all the things that people have been writing to us about. And I think it's because they feel like they're being brought in, you know, like my line, the setback line, like we were all talking about, if there's a setback and we can determine what that is. But even then, when you do a front or west barrier line or setback, then it's like some of the hotels I think had mentioned and others have mentioned, well, can I come with my tent and put my tent in front of that line too? Or are we saying we don't want anything in front of that setback on the wet sand? I know there's discussion of private, public beach, but if you own to the mean high water line and you come as a family and you're walking down the beach and you put your tent in front of, or umbrella or chair or whatever it may be, are we saying you can't do that either? Like everything is going to be clean along that side? Or do you all have to be behind the setback, including public beach, private properties?
This is just about cabanas.
Just
Right?
cabanas?
We're just talking about, this is the section on cabanas right now, right?
Well, it's temporary structures, I think, that we're on.
I think we're encompasses chairs, umbrellas.
Chairs,
Like somebody just comes to the beach, it encompasses their umbrella as well.
That's what she's asking.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm asking, like what
does
do you
it?
want it to look like? Because we're on temporary structures, we're saying cabanas, it should be chairs, tables, umbrellas, you know, all the above. So what does that mean, you know, and what are we trying to prevent, you know? I mean, that's just a question. I mean, I want to move on and decide because, you know, I don't want to do the details. I don't think that's our job to figure out how permitting is going to do it or how we're going to manage it, how we're going to enforce it. We know there's an issue, but I mean, we could spend more days on this talking about this, but we need, I don't know, what do we want it to look like? I looked into other ordinances in other cities. Some cities have things called, what was it called, the high impact period, right? 4th of July's, some summer periods where the city does determine you can't have any more than 10,000 people on that area of the beach. And at that point, enforcement can come and prevent you from going and increasing it, right? Like you're saying, Dolphin Village, maybe it's too full. Maybe the Sunrunner is impacting it. So can we determine what is the number? Is it capacity of people? Is it tents? Is it chairs? You know, like what are we counting? And you can have an ordinance that prevents it or stops it. I mean, you could have an event at a hotel that could increase. I don't want to base it off of hotel rooms because you could have a conference at any of these hotels and now you have way more people there. So, you know, again, what do you want it to look like? Because there's a lot of things that could impact the beach.
Member Kurtzman, 30 seconds, please. We need to move on.
If we could break this policy discussion up into several things, because I heard a few different things. So this section right now, we could be saying is, this is the discussion about transient lodging facilities. So this is about saying, what would we be giving the permit to hotels or, you know, facilities to do with regards to lodging, you know, these facilities for umbrellas and chairs and so forth. And then what I heard was a discussion about what would we be allowing the public to do in front of those facilities. And then I also heard something about like special events. And then maybe that's the way to have these discussions. You know, not get hung up in the details about what section we're in, but have a discussion about, you know, do we want to just jump into a discussion about what's the policy about, what do we do about the people who now come and start building their tents right in front of the hotels? That's another discussion. And then what
All right, let's limit the discussion at this point to let's deal with one issue at a time. So why don't we tackle the cabanas at the hotels right now? The issue of do they come in at night? Do they stay out? How many? Where? Setbacks? And so on.
Yeah, I always saw that as a commercial operation.
Yeah.
Not, the other thing we have to think about, obviously, is enforcement. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned it because it's just so the public understands. I mean, we can't see everything at all times. We just don't have enough people to do so. We have one beach manager. We have 4 people in code enforcement. So even with a new ordinance, there are going to be the hot ticket item, 4th of July's, Memorial Day, Labor Day, where things get out of hand. I mean, that's just part of having a beautiful beach.
think that's why I was trying to narrow it down to what is the real problem. And from what I'm hearing, it's negatively affecting neighbors. And if we can just figure out whatever that best solution is to do that, maybe there isn't a perfect solution, but something to help ameliorate that would satisfy me.
Okay, so
is there a consensus that the hotels can leave the chairs overnight, and you can have, and staff can work on setting some buffers and parameters, and potentially some density requirements that would limit the area?
I would like to see what that looks like.
Yes, and we started that, and I think that's what I'm hearing is we can sit down, do the buffers, make sure public access is part of that too, and then go to each property and show what the density formula is and what that would look like on that property.
I think we could break it up into maybe two components, because there is a difference between the cabanas that are permanently fixed in, whether it's rebar and some other, and whether they have additional standby chairs and umbrellas available. So maybe we could look at something where you can have no more than 30 to 50% cabanas permanently, and then have an additional allocation that has to be brought in at night.
And that's what I was thinking, was that the standard would be set for the density in the ordinance as to what could stay there permanently.
Yep.
But the buffers would also be in place to control that daytime density for those that were added during the day.
Yep. And I think when we look at buffers, because the beach is so varied in depth, Pastor Grill, for example, if you haven't been down there recently, I encourage you to go at high tide. It's unbelievable. And then you have other areas in District 3 and District 2 where you have 100 yards of beach. So, the way we have it now with 75 feet from the water line, that's great. But I think in other areas, maybe we look at it no more than this far from the structure line or erosion control line, or so that, you don't have a property that has 100 yards of beach and they just put in 50 rows of stuff,
and I think,
just because we can, but rather limit it and say, okay, so it's a narrow beach, it's got to be 75 feet from the water, where you have an extra amount of depth, then maybe it's 100 feet from the property line, 150 feet from the property line, or 75 feet from the water, whichever is closer to the property line.
and I'm guessing it's really Upham and Paso Grill that are those, I'll call skinny beaches,
Yeah.
that we control that cabana usage.
Correct.
Upham does not have doesn't have the same problem as Paso Grill. I mean, at high tide, just to finish on the mayor's comment,
You still have
if you go down there at high tide, there is no beach, right? So that's the problem. I think we also, though, for discussion, have to recognize that we all received emails from the hoteliers, I would say vehemently disagreeing with any bringing in of the chairs at night, and that it causes them a workload problem and a cost problem. So we ought to put it on the table before we get 2, 3 weeks, a month down the road, and we'll hear it again. I mean, it's there, they've expressed it to us. We should recognize it and at least have a discussion on it
And
now.
I think that's a compromise by having the semi-permanent structures. Member Welch, you disagree? Go ahead.
Well, you have to define what a cabana is. And a cabana is the old-fashioned thing that is...
Well, if it's fixed in place, right? The semi-permanent with stakes and rebars and so on.
Exactly. Those are
Yep.
easy for the turtles to get around, for one thing.
Yep.
And they're not heavy. They can be moved. I don't think if I were a hotel and I had that permanent for a room, and I had that room booked, I'd want to move that every night, but I certainly could in a storm.
Sure.
Or if it was turtle season.
Yeah.
The giant things that they have up and down the beach now, you would have to have a crew of hundreds to move those. They're gigantic. They're heavy. They're not what I think of as a cabana. But they are what they have. They're willing, I understand, to change those to a more practical cabana that the turtles could walk under and the people could walk through more easily. But, you know, there's also, if I'm a hotel, I don't want people wandering my property misbehaving. I don't mind people coming in and having a drink or having lunch. I want that. But you have to have control over your own property if you're a commercial business.
I think that's why, you know, for example, if half of your density is semi-permanent, fixed cabanas, chairs, or whatever they look like, right, that do not have to be brought in, and those could be limited to, let's say, within 50 feet from your property line. And then the next 50 feet or whatever, you have additional chairs. The rest of your density is just temporary. You bring it out as necessary, and it goes back in at night. I mean, again, we've all seen the operations. You come out, you have a drill, stake goes in the ground, umbrella goes in the ground, here's 2 chairs, okay? I'm not saying it's not gonna take additional staff. Yes, it may do that. But again, we're trying to find something that works for the visitors, for the residents.
Yes.
And so I think giving a little bit and taking a little bit from both sides.
And if I could add one more thing.
Sure.
I think we better define what we allow on the beach. If we're going to allow 10 by 10 tents set up next to each other, we're going to be in trouble.
Yep, I think that's one of the next areas. So let's finish this one and then we'll get to that one.
No, I mean, we used to go to we'd
Yeah.
occasionally set up a tent if we had 1 million people, but
Yeah.
that was.
Remember Marriott?
Yeah, just I'm always trying to look for unintended consequences, and so I just wanted to express my other concern that if you have the hotels where they have a certain amount of density that can stay out and the rest they have to bring out when it's required, that I can envision a scenario when on a busy weekend, when they have their certain amount out, they have a guest who comes up and wants the 2 chairs, their staff goes out to set up the 2 chairs, somebody has come down the public beach and set up a 10 by 10 tent or whatever on their property next to their chairs. Are we prepared to have the hotel then go, you guys got to pack up and get out of here because we have to set up our chairs and this is our property?
Yeah, I don't think that falls into the purview of what we're dealing with here.
More issues of people getting kicked off of private beaches and being unhappy.
So,
And
if I may, Mayor.
than if the space is more
Because
delineated.
let's just assume we're doing the 50%, right? We're leaving, hotels are allowed to leave out 50%. They're smart enough, they're gonna leave 50% of the chairs closest to the water.
Yeah, but not if
Everyone-
we have it with a buffer from the back of the property rather than from the water forward.
Well, everyone wants that first row so that you have clear access to the water.
Sure.
So I'm just thinking like a business person. They're gonna leave, let's say, the first 2 or 3 rows of chairs because, so essentially on a busy weekend, they're smart enough, they're gonna say, okay, these chairs are gonna go pretty quickly, and they're gonna have the entire morning until all 3 rows of those are filled to pull out other chairs.
So
They're going to be there
we're not
earlier
gonna
than the
require that
visitors.
We're not
Yeah.
going to require that the chairs be occupied then. We're just going to go off density, not occupy, not.
We're talking about at the end of the day, once sunset goes and everyone's clapped and having a good time and going back to their room, what can stay on the beach overnight?
And again, as I said before, the trade winds has the cabanas rented with the rooms. So if you rent a room, a large number of rooms, the majority of the rooms, so I understand, you have a cabana with that room. Now, if I have a cabana that I'm paying for as part of my room cost, I want it there when I want it. Which is.
Yeah, are they going to only be able to have half
Because you pay
half the
for it.
rooms have cabanas because they
Pardon?
can't? Yeah, I mean, are we going to be limiting them to how many cabanas they can rent with rooms? They won't have the time to
Yeah.
drag them out. You know, yeah, that's a.
There's plenty of hotels, even in the spreadsheet that we got, that charge per day. They charge visitors if they want to come versus if it's included with the room, and it wasn't very clear if they have enough cabanas for every room or if they have double the number of cabanas as they have per room because,
Number of rooms that have cabanas attached to them,
yeah,
like 600 or something.
sure, and there's an opportunity for an upsell there. You know, here's a room with the cabana, here's a room that doesn't come with the cabana.
Correct.
Yeah, that's administrative. We're going to deal with policy today here, and then we'll leave the administration to the administration.
Thank you. So if we have a consensus there, then I think, Commissioner Marone, you mentioned vehicle permits was another, which is actually the next section.
What we're in right now. So,
We're done with the hotels pulling in, pulling out.
can I get clarification that what we were just sort of agreeing to when we even talked about cabanas is we were using the generic meaning of the word cabana, and because our definition of cabana in the ordinance today.
No, the definition that I gave for what my recommendation, the definition that I gave for my recommendation was structures, chairs, cabanas, whatever you want to call them, that are permanently or semi-permanently affixed.
Right, so what I want to understand then is, because we've assigned this territory, or we're going to go with a quota system or a formula, and are we still going to then, though, still allow this cabana zone where we're going to say, do not enter?
No, we're going to discuss that. We'll discuss it when we get to that point. So let's take it one section at a time. Matthew, if you don't mind.
I sort of feel like they're very intertwined.
Yep.
And I sort of feel like it's a...
Yeah. Well, when we get to that section, we'll deal with that section as well. So
not to
City
speak
Attorney?
for you, but last workshop, you said vehicle permits was, I jot that down
which
as,
section is that, please?
that's the next one, 95.8.
Okay.
Yeah, you said vehicles on the beach. If it's not an issue, then we can,
Oh, overnight vehicles at the beach.
on the actual sand.
Oh, no, not on the.
Oh, I was
No,
like,
no, I wasn't talking about.
that's a first.
Yeah, I was not talking about
Okay.
vehicles on the sand, no.
So then, yeah, Mayor, I mean, we can go section by section, or if
We can talk about vehicles for a moment.
okay.
I mean, there's all sorts of vehicles on the beach right now. You've got not the ones that belong to the city that are doing cleanup or otherwise, but you've got big tractors pulling in equipment back and forth. You've got golf carts. You have electric, gas golf carts, cars, and all sorts of other things. I think in the interest, especially from what we've seen in the past few holiday weekends, we really need to have a discussion on whether we should continue allowing vehicles on the beach, vehicles that are not city or sheriff, and how those permits are allocated, whether we limit it to only electric vehicles, whether we look at some other options, because it seems to be becoming a safety concern. In fact, there was a nice article by the sheriff running somebody over last year, if you remember that.
I do.
We had on the electric, we have in item H
Yeah.
that for January of 20, we had discussed January of 26 as a thou shalt date, because it was a bit nebulous before. It wasn't well defined to give people time to do the conversions. Yeah, we do have multiple vehicles, different types of vehicles. I call them, they're work vehicles, mostly from the commercial properties, although there is one property that has a permit that's supposed to, my understanding, it's supposed to stay on their private area, private zone that goes around to this larger cabana area term, which will clarify selling alcohol, selling drinks to people in the cabana area. I have also, and shared with the city, they have also taken that off of their cabana area in further west than I thought the lines, but that's again, down to an enforcement issue.
Which more and more, reading the complaints, reading the emails, and it just keeps coming back to the same word in my head: enforcement, enforcement,
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah, we've got two issues, clearly, and those of us, we've all received, and for the public, we've received a lot of emails after the July 4th weekend. I want to put this discussion to two buckets. We've got the enforcement bucket of bad behavior that we have to address, but we also have to get an ordinance in place that will also help us to enforce what's not clear today and work on the current enforcement. But these vehicles on the beach, on a holiday weekend, more important, how do you get emergency vehicles on the beach, for example, on the holiday weekend? You couldn't walk in a good chunk of the northern part of the beach on July 4th, July 3rd, July 4th. You couldn't physically walk.
Yeah.
So how do we get an emergency vehicle on the beach and to where it needs to get to.
Well, and so I guess to answer that question, because it kind of goes back to the bigger the buffer, the more room someone has to just spitballing here, right? The further you're away from the wet sand, the more space that you have that won't be occupied, that emergency vehicles can go through. However, policy-wise, city beach maintenance vehicles, like what are you okay with? Obviously, the sheriff, emergency response, city beach maintenance, any mechanical beach cleaning, because any nourishment and stuff like that obviously will be required a permit. But then what I'm hearing is the vehicles for commercial activities and special events, are those?
Because I know that there's vehicles that hotels use to bring in their water sport equipment that I think is probably pretty reasonable in light of the weight of the equipment, including jet, wave runners. So I don't think that that's an issue.
Well, that goes then back to the next one. The next section is whether it's reasonable to keep doing that on the beach with the congestion that we're currently having and the safety issues that we're having, is to have motorized vehicles going back and forth, is to have water sport equipment in the middle of the beach that's congested in the water next to people. So I mean, I think that's one of the upcoming sections here.
Maybe limiting
Yep.
the amount of vehicles per commercial business.
Right, so really it comes down to,
I guess, yeah.
it's the people applying for permits to the city, which we have a process in place for. And I'll just play devil's advocate. How do we know for any commercial establishment, do they need one or do they need four? And I just throw it out there just for discussion. How do we know?
I think maybe we can divide it into vehicles, kind of like a temporary use vehicle where you, for example, when the ones in the morning where you bring things out and when you pull things back at night. So you could have they all got to be gone by 9 a.m.
You call those transport vehicles?
Yeah. But then from 9 a.m. to, I don't know, 4 p.m. in the winter, because that's when it gets dark, right? You have no motorized vehicle on the beach, no commercial activity vehicles on the beach. I'm just throwing out an idea, for example, because that will give you the opportunity to use, whether you want to pull 20 chairs on the trolley, right? Or pull out whatever else you need to do, great, and then the same thing at night. But then in between those hours when it's busiest, there's no vehicles on the beach. Yes, Member Merritt?
I want to make sure we're solving a problem that exists and not just, trying to unduly burden people who are trying to make a living. And, to my knowledge, the only people who have ever run anybody over on the beach is the sheriff. And I don't think any of the hotel's vehicles have ever hurt anybody on the beach. And so I would hesitate to over-regulate them just because we can, if there hasn't been a problem already. I mean, I get wanting to issue some kind of permits, but trying to put a whole lot of regulations on people's business when we don't know all the details of their business seems a little bit unduly burdensome.
Do we know at the city level, how many permits or vehicle permits have been issued to date?
We have that information. I don't have it with me today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any situation in which one resort needs 12 vehicles. I mean, just throwing a number out. I mean, there could be some kind of limiting factor here, in my opinion. But you have to remember, if we're going to set a buffer and we're going to require 50%, which obviously we're going to work on, the time frame for removing vehicles would need to be sufficient for them to pull off whatever they need to at the end of the night.
I think the issue really comes down to the safety issue, because there is no area. I mean, I know at one point we had talked about a roadway or service road or something as far east as can be on the beach. That would be where the vehicles could go north and south when they needed to do whatever, and stayed out of the populated area, which, for example, as I said, over a holiday weekend, I don't even know how the emergency vehicle would have gone through. But we don't we don't have that. So I don't know how the Assistant City Attorney, 12 seems like a large number, but without knowing the operation, maybe 12 is a reasonable number. I don't know, and how far, to Member Merritt's point, how far into this do we want to get? And is the problem, what is the problem we're trying to solve here?
And I can remember when 10,000 people used to be behind the Don Cesar in the mid-'80s. They had wave runners and jet skis. They have four-wheelers going in and out of there. No one's ever gotten hurt. I'm not saying somebody can't get hurt. I mean, we're probably more susceptible to people not heating the swim buoys and bringing their boats in and backing them in and not knowing how to anchor their boats when they do illegally back them in than anything that we have out of the beach. There's always a chance somebody's going to get hurt. There just is. I just haven't seen it. And I've been coming to this beach since 1970. I just haven't seen it. It might happen. It could happen.
And I would say the jet ski operators that I've seen over the years are very careful, and there are we have permits that allow only a specific number. There have been years where they've wanted to add those, and we said, no, enough is enough. I think there is a thing, and it's not just the operators. I'm thinking the residents and tourists. We as residents like to rent them. And so the thing I want to be careful about timing on that is, with the way I see it, is they're never sure how many people are going to rent to, so they may put out 3 or 4 of them. They don't want to put out 8 of them and have them all floating around, trying to manage 8 if they're only going to rent 4. But if all of a sudden it's a nice day and now they're going to bring more out. So I just want to be careful about how we, I don't totally understand their operations. I'm just kind of watching it, visualizing it. So again, it's being careful about those unintended consequences. They're very careful from what I've seen. Yeah. And, they slowly back up a little trailer and they make sure, if it's a really busy day that, people are respectful that are walking along the beach, and they stop, everybody stops and let them, drop off another jet ski or 2. So, and those are the ones that have to go, not perpendicular to the beach, not parallel to the beach, as Commissioner Grill is mentioning. That's more service vehicles, but those with the power sports operators are a little bit different.
Yeah, the service, again, I don't feel we have enough visibility, knowledge to make a knowledgeable decision. Well, you already have 4, you don't need number 5, for example. But I think at a certain point, I'm sure with the permit process, there is a justification on why do you need this in the application process. I think, just my personal observation is I have seen, and this is anecdotal, it's not scientific data, but some of the service vehicles moving, I have to say, a bit too fast north and south. But it comes down to, my other hand, the bucket problem of enforcement. We need to have a speed limit and maintain the speed limit, no matter who it is, except the sheriffs need to do what they need to do, and emergency vehicles.
Member Kurtzman?
Yeah, the current ordinance says that insurance may be required. The proposed ordinance says insurance shall be required. I'm not sure what brought about that change, that it must, that insurance must be had. The current ordinance says that vehicles, cannot be driven, and I think that without a permit, and I think that some people originally, I want to talk about bicycles. Some people may originally have thought that would make it illegal to ride bikes on the street. But remember, on the bike in the beach, and I think that customarily though, people have ridden bicycles on the beach because they don't really drive bikes; they ride bikes. And I want to just roll the clock back and talk about e-bikes because.
Member Kurtzman, I'm sorry, but we're on this point right now with these commercial vehicles. So we're on the point with the commercial vehicle permits right now. We want to finish this point off before we move on to a different one. So we can.
I think this is about, because part of this included bikes in here, and there was something about residents having a permit for bikes.
Yes, and that's 95. Yeah, it's 95.8.c. 95.8.c is what he's referring to.
Okay.
So I was just trying that if that is what we want to try to do, if we think back to when the ordinance was done, it was really to address all these commercial operations, sort of like when we had the ramps to get out of control, commercial ordinance, commercial operations take over ramps and abuse them. There was a rush to try to get that under control, and there was a rush to try to get the micromobility under control, and we sort of sunk the citizens into that. And so what I'm asking is that when we do a permit for bikes, that we let the permit let people pedal their e-bikes that have wide tires, and we're able to get out of the way of people. And it's important that older people like myself that want to be able to pedal responsibly and have pedal assist, and that's how I can get around. And the both working is dangerous. The distance pedal is really a safety thing. So it's a way to get around. And the beach is a really better way to get around a lot of the time of the year. Obviously, in July, it would be idiotic to do that. And to be below 20th Street, nobody's talking about doing this in passive grill in crowded areas. And we restrict it. We can even say things like, if the parking app says that more than 50% of the parking spaces are used, nobody should be bicycle riding on the beach. We have lots of metrics we can do, but let's be creative and not put the baby out with the bathwater, and maybe try to keep our citizens safe and citizens and only maybe come up with a way that we can let our residents pedal on the beach if they can. Thank you.
So if we go back to the point for a moment, and we'll come back to bicycles in a moment, for vehicles on the beach, do we, just to move it forward here, do we want to set a number or leave it to the administratively to say, from a policy decision, no vehicles on the beach unless they have a permit, and we handle the permits administratively, and we leave to the administrative process to determine as best they can based on the application whether the number of vehicles for any one commercial property is, quote, reasonable or not reasonable?
Yeah, I do have one question about the permits, because I see, so when you issue your permit, is that just a permit for that vehicle to go anywhere on the beach?
No.
Because we see vehicles crossing property lines all day long. Yeah. Happens all day long, because employees need to go from one entity to another. They want to, I don't know why, but you see it happening all the time. And so, again, comes back to whether it's enforcement or so, but if it currently is limited to only on their property.
Yep, they indicate what property that they are. And if they were to go over other properties, they need a written permission from those properties that they can transverse across that property. That's how our application reads.
Would it read so they would not need a amendment to the permit, just permission?
And on how they would apply and what they would provide at the time to get the permit.
So to answer, both of your questions, I think the consensus is there should be allowed, whether it's 2, 3, 4, the consensus is city beach maintenance operation vehicles should be allowed on the beach, special events, mechanical beach cleaning, and commercial activities. I think we're all in an agreement that these, whether they're limited or not, should be allowed on the beach, which means they should be required a permit. Now, we can always amend our permit language, which we've done for our BTRs, for short-term rentals, for some other things, and we can add annotations on there administratively to ensure that we are making property owners aware of these things when they applied for a permit. So you don't always have to put it in the code. As long as you're saying a permit's required, then administratively we can work on the permit language in the application to ensure some of these issues are addressed.
I agree with the scope that you've outlined.
I'm good with that, too.
And then one more thing we agreed, or the consensus was bicycles on the beach, however, electric bicycles not on the beach. Is that still an agreement?
I would remove the permitting for residents' bikes. I think that's additional administration, that's additional enforcement, that's not going to happen. That's more resources for the city we have to expend so that we can now have a new process for permitting, and how we're going to do all the education, then whether we're going to start ticketing our residents who want to ride bicycles.
I
We either
agree with
let
the mayor.
vehicles there or we don't let bicycles there.
I've brought up that issue for a year. I think it's, the intent was, how do you limit bicycles, because there was a safety concern, but I've made this point
Yeah.
for a year now.
I think we were trying to
think it-
carve out an exception for residents
It
to be
gives
able to
extra,
utilize.
extra work to the city staff,
Okay.
which, and I don't see the benefit, a benefit commensurate with the work, that effort to put into it. And then you have the enforcement issue. I don't know how we would enforce it, and is this really the issue we want the sheriff's deputies or whoever's on the beach enforcing, stopping a bicyclist to say, can I see your permit?
Okay, so all bicycles allowed on the beach? No,
Yes.
no electric, no permit?
Correct.
Got it.
So
So the next,
or only non-electric, what do you say, I couldn't hear?
yes, only non-electric bicycles are not allowed on the beach.
No bikes.
No.
No bicycles
Electric bicycles are not allowed on the beach.
are regular, but do people want?
Only regular bikes.
I would get rid of all bicycles.
But let me clarify that. Are you saying that only residents on regular bikes, or are you allowing anyone with regular bikes?
If you don't require a permit, then it's anyone can ride a bike on the
So I'll
beach.
just remind everybody, the reason why this came up is because they were commercial businesses that were renting bikes, and all of a sudden we had a trail of, 20 or 30 bikes riding up and down the beach. That was the complaint that I heard from residents, is that, when did you guys allow bikes on the beach? So that's how this kind of started. It was a specific problem that was being solved. So I'm okay if we don't require a permit. And I know it's an enforcement issue. I guess, sheriff, if they ever want to stop you, and probably want to stop you for causing a problem, and say, are you a resident, where do you live? And I guess,
I'm okay with all bikes on the beach, resident or non-resident, without a permit. The issue that you brought up is a valid issue, except the reality is, and all of you guys, everybody here walks the beach. You know how hard it is to pedal your bike on the beach if there's not low tide. Most people can't get their bike through the sand. So there is a small window of time every day where you can ride your bike on the beach. I just don't think it's that big. Oh,
And
go
then
ahead.
we can also go back to the same as the kayaks at the boat ramp that we addressed last commission meeting with a permit.
Through the
that-
BTR,
So that
correct.
if you have a commercial activity on the beach, it requires a permit. So
Correct.
if we don't issue permits for bikes on the
I'm
beach,
okay with that.
then
I just don't want to have a
Yeah.
repeat of
The-
the issue that started it.
The only issue with that, Mayor, is I highly doubt these bike rental companies follow their clients everywhere they go. So once you rent a bike, how are you supposed to, I mean, you can notify them not to not go on the beach,
we
but
pull their permit. We find your clients on the beach, we pull your permit.
But when this came up about a year ago, I called a few of the bicycle rental shops, and they said, we don't allow our bicycles on the beach because it causes rust, right? Salt water and aluminum frame, and, when bicycles don't mix very well, as we all know.
It's easy to identify them. They're all painted the same.
Yeah.
But
Actually, that is what's been addressed in the micromobility ordinance. The micromobility ordinance does now prevent these people from using those rented e-bikes on the beach. But what I'm indicating is, when that ordinance was enacted, it was advertised as a micromobility ordinance, which by definition includes non-rental devices, but wasn't even advertised to get public comment.
So, Mr. Kurtzman, respectfully, you're sitting on the beach stewardship as a board member looking out for the benefit of the entire city. You and I have had this conversation multiple times on micromobility, and I understand that you personally would like to ride your electric bike on the beach, but right now you're in a different capacity, okay? You're looking out for the better of the city.
And so I will state, for the betterment of the city, that to avoid the city putting itself in a situation where and I've stated this before, the city wants to make sure that it puts out for public comment. And right now, this is an opportunity to do so. I think it would be a great opportunity to really just, why wouldn't the city want to let people use fat tires and ride on the beach cautiously
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Member Resnicki, you had a comment?
Yeah.
I just, I don't want to speak personally because I've already been here for public comment individually on the matter of bikes. But we're jumping to another thing again, and what are we addressing? What's the problem? I haven't read on the news that anybody got run over by a bike either.
Exactly.
Okay, so,
Exactly.
you know, I get frustrated with it because those of you who saw me here speak on behalf of the bikes know I don't see the issue. What is it? Enforcement, right? We're
Yep.
talking about enforcement and bad behavior. Regardless of whether we have this ordinance or not, there's going to be someone on micromobility on the beach. There is going to be someone on a bike. There is, whether electric or pedal, they're going to do it. Okay? They're doing it with the dogs on the beach. It's constant. So we have an issue of enforcement.
But the speed of the electric vehicle
Correct.
raises the level of exposure to injury
100% agree with
to
you.
tenfold. Tenfold. Because you have people walking down, they don't hear the bike, they step one way or the other. The bike rider's looking at his what? Cell phone?
Correct. I completely,
Member Resnicki, thank you. That is a perfect segue to section 9511, animals on the beach.
Wait, so just city attorney, assistant city attorney, do we have the, are we
Yeah.
closed on this? You
I have what I need on that one. I had it. But Mayor, 9510 is prohibitions on
Sorry.
Sand Beach.
Let's see.
And the only reason why I wanted to mention this is because there was an in-depth conversation about like massive speakers that were discussed, like 5-foot-high speakers and all. So I didn't know if maybe the consensus was to add. I was already going to amend this prohibitions on Sand Beach because it's related to alcohol and smoking on the beach, but I didn't know if we wanted to include some more prohibitions, such as 5-foot-tall speakers and some of the things that were discussed at the last meeting.
Would that be part of our noise ordinance? Just an enforcement of
The decibel level is part of our noise ordinance, but the size of the speaker is, I'm just mentioning it because it came up last meeting.
If you bring, you know, we had the problem over 4th of July in District 2 with someone bringing in a 5-foot-high speakers. But instead of getting very prescriptive and nitpicky, is it a volume problem or a size problem?
it's a volume problem.
It's a volume
It
problem.
is because you can get small speakers that are
Right.
unbelievable.
So let's address the volume problem, not get hung up whether it's 6 feet, 5 feet, 2 feet, whatever. It's a volume problem. And that's the issue.
It's a noise ordinance.
That's the problem that beachgoers are concerned with.
Okay.
The one question on this that I may have is, though, I mean, we're talking about alcohol, and I don't know if, I think most of you have seen the videos of what appears to be just rampant drug use. Is that addressed in here? Because it,
That's a state statute issue. It's
No,
enforcement.
it's a crime is what it is.
Yeah, crime.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, from what I heard from a lot of residents, there may be individuals who are out there smoking or using other recreational drugs that may not be permitted in the state of Florida.
So, medical marijuana is with a state-issued ID. The catch is you can't do it on public property. The beach is public. So, I mean, you can do it in your home and there's in your car. There's other scenarios in which you can do it, but other drug use, that's the only one that I'm thinking of that people may enjoy recreationally or something on the beach, but you can't do it.
But that comes down to enforcement.
Yeah, if we're enforcing that as an ordinance, we're simultaneously calling the sheriff's office so that they can arrest them for a state statute violation.
Yeah, that's a sheriff's office.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
Well, because you may be allowed to do it again, but it's not in public places.
Okay.
right, we have said no alcohol on the beach, except in the designated areas.
Correct.
And drug use, we don't need to write an ordinance on that. We need to enforce it, because I think everyone in here would agree there's a problem. It's outside of the appropriate, the permitted areas.
Just may point out that if we stopped drug use on the beach, we would probably arrest everybody walking down the beach who's taking prescriptions. So, just as a little aside, this is America.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so animals,
Dan's got something.
oh, I'm sorry.
Alcohol, we currently have not an ordinance, but we can't drink alcohol on the beach, correct? The last 2 weeks, I've been working with my wife on trash collection, Paso Grill, and I know that was a 4th of July weekend. I'd say a quarter to a third of the garbage that were in the 8-yard dumpsters and the trash cans were beer bottles, champagne bottles. There was even a Heineken Pony keg down on the far end.
And you know how many deputies I saw driving up and down the beach in Paso Grill over that weekend? 0.
And
So again, we're focused on policy, we need to address the enforcement issue.
Yeah.
These are perfect examples, perfect, and everyone.
And we
sure has
could
got
put up
multiple.
signs, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do once this ordinance is passed. Not that it may help every scenario, but we could do more.
We've had speed limits on the nation's roads for years, we still give out speeding tickets. I mean,
Great.
it will be bad behavior.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Let's move forward.
what do the signs that say, no dogs, no alcohol, that they're there now, are they backed up by an ordinance? It says you can't do that.
You can't drink in public, can you?
The no
In our
alcohol.
public parks, yeah, no.
It's in our ordinance.
I'd have to confirm. I don't want to speak without reviewing. So, if I may, Mayor, I think we're on to animals on the beach. I understand that dogs have been an issue, but just so everyone understands, service dogs are federal. I mean, it's ADA, it's federal law. You can't require that they prove that it's a service dog. You can ask them, they can answer yes, and at that point, that's where the questioning ends. So, do people know this? Yes. Do they take advantage of it? Yes. But we're our hands are tied.
But we could
in that regard.
also say, hey, look, you can't have dogs on the beach. And they said, and we have a dog beach over there, at least in Paso Grill. And I sent you pictures
Yes.
with multiple dogs all in one day, 4 dogs, people just coming out with them, all in a 2-block area. Maybe they were service dogs, maybe they weren't. I'm thinking they weren't. But that doesn't mean we can't tell them about our ordinance. We can approach them and tell them that, and you saying that you can't ask them if it's a service dog. But
No,
most
you can ask them, but you can't ask for
Yeah.
proof. But no, I mean, half of enforcement is knowledge, is teaching, right? Hey, just so you know, we have a dog beach over here that allows for these dogs, regardless of their service or not.
we don't have that body, we don't have that person, that body on the beach, that person of authority doing that. So I think if they did that,
Or they ask the
have an
question,
ordinance.
and these people know how to, they know how to answer it.
Yeah,
I
they
would
do.
probably guess, and 70% of the dogs you see on the beach are not service dogs. That's-
And then half of them are without leashes.
and okay, so
that is-
leashes, okay, I'll think about that one.
I mean, it's in here.
Yeah, but this is for the dog beach, and then it clearly says service animals are exempt. It gets, just down here in, sometimes people who are, who can't see, who are blind, there are situations where
We had that.
dogs are allowed to be off of a leash if they're service animals in a
voice
certain
command.
regard. Yeah. So legally, I'd prefer to not touch it. So if we have a consensus that we're okay with how we laid out, like
Member Mayor,
prohibited.
Yeah, just a quick question. I've heard people say that if you arrive at the beach in a boat and you have your dog on the wet sand, that's allowed. And I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if that needs to be addressed.
Hopefully they're listening, because no, it's not allowed.
All right.
Thank you for asking, though.
Of that, the state or the feds?
It's interesting because the wet sand is state sovereign land that's within our jurisdiction, which is why citizens, no matter where you are on the beach, can always traverse north or south. You can always walk the beach.
True.
But I'll look at this. We still control we can regulate the property within our jurisdiction.
I have a question.
yes.
And this is an assignment, I don't want an answer for it, but if it's possible, because there is an issue with the dogs or animals overall, can there be homework done on service animals? Because, I did ask a couple of friends of mine who are therapists who actually issue the letters for service dogs, and they told me it's very specific why someone gets a letter. that allows them to travel, for example, with a dog.
I think this brings to a different question, which is service versus emotional support. And there's a difference between service animals, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, this addresses service animals, not emotional support.
Well, and the reality is you can get an emotional support letter for $50 online
Pretty much.
and never see the doctor.
And then
So,
the other
I
thing
mean-
would be, maybe, I mean, if this is federal, or maybe we can get some state representatives or something to help us out to clarify this, because it's very hard when you see dogs, because of bad behavior, right, running up and down the beach with no leash, large dogs. And it's happened to me a couple of times with my daughter on the beach, and, you know, we just get yelled at, you know. I was at Fort DeSoto this past weekend, and I did see them ask them to move the dog off and move to the dog area, because the dogs were literally running up and down all the black skimmers that were nesting right on the beach. So why could some places ask or not, or how are they asking? Maybe we could ask why they're able to do it at Fort DeSoto, for example, to ask people to move to the public dog beach.
We have to have somebody we need somebody there to ask those questions. We don't even have anybody to
Correct.
ask.
There was someone.
We have no one on the beach
who
right
went
now.
up to them and asked them to move to
Yeah.
the dog beach.
But I think for St. Pete Beach, once we get north of 15th Ave, no one's gonna go from Upland Beach down to the dog beach.
That's true.
So,
They don't like walking 5 blocks,
right.
you know?
So if you could, I mean, if you could just maybe verify that, is there any way, I mean, and we take what you say is, of course, correct, that you can only ask and you get an answer, and that's as far under ADA that you can, and
Yeah, I
of course
can.
need to follow and respect ADA 100%. But
I can.
it's, I think the feedback we get, it's frustrating, and people are gaming the system when they shouldn't, and shame on them for doing that and taking advantage of ADA, but that's a
is.
different discussion.
I can definitely look into that. Because the whole thought is to be able to provide knowledge to the person enforcing this as
Sure.
well and come up with a script of some sort. So yeah, I can definitely do that, Vice Mayor. So if there's a consensus there, I think the next section, the next couple sections, we have fishing on the beach, which I mentioned multiple times. We are preempted to regulate. So I understand there may be an issue with people fishing and you running into lines, but the state preempts us from regulating the taking of fishing. Okay, so we can't put them to a certain area, we can't limit it to a certain time frame. We live in Florida, people fish pretty much wherever there's a body of water, even canals on roads and things like that. So that's why what we put in here is just, if you get warned because you've done something bad by a sheriff, then you can't do it again. But we're not regulating it. So if there's a consensus there, feeding wild birds as well. I didn't really hear any issues with that. Obviously, you don't want birds coming to you, okay? Fireworks, it's also regulated by Florida statute, but I think it's pretty clear that you don't want people shooting off fireworks on 4th of July on the beach.
I don't know where you were on the 4th of July, but
Yeah, exactly.
we had our,
Eat our
yeah, it was, it could have been, you know, we can save some money for the city, because they were great shows everywhere. But yes, this is a state, the jokes aside, this is a state
is.
statute.
And the sheriff.
And,
So here in consensus there, micromobility.
We addressed those tents people are bringing out that I sent you the pictures of.
Yeah, we get them,
they come later, I think.
yeah, thought it was later.
For some reason, they
We can. And then vending on the beaches.
So micromobility, are we there? We need more discussion on that point?
No, I think the consensus was no electric bicycles on the beach.
But
And-
here we're even referencing sidewalks. Well, why is the importance of referencing sidewalks in our beach ordinance when earlier we've even stricken, we have parts of our ordinances, we have different chapters of our ordinances. We have a chapter on alcohol. We have a chapter on animals. And our chapter on alcohol we struck. We didn't rename our alcohol chapter alcohol except beaches. We didn't rename our animal chapter animal except beaches. And yet we struck the part of our alcohol chapter about the beaches from the alcohol chapter. We struck the part about the beaches from our animal chapter. Yet here, when we have things that normally you would strike the things that would now be in separate chapters, such as the part about sidewalks belong in the sidewalk chapter, the thing about beaches belong in the beach chapter. Here we're not doing that, we're cross-referencing.
Appreciate your concern. We'll take out that sentence. Mr. Kurtzman, we'll just take out the second sentence. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
No problem.
I think in those other sections, we really need to put those other ones back, because otherwise people are going to be misled.
So, Mayor, Commissioner Marone brought up a point. I don't know if we're going to get to it because it's about 5:26.
I just got pictures, I just want
But,
to show the pictures.
so there were language in here, and I can't find it right now, that limited tent size to 10 by 10. Okay, but the pictures I got over the weekend, and Ayako gave me, and Commissioner Marone gave me, people are banding these together. So they're essentially 10 by 10, but then you put them together and it's 20 by 20. And then I've seen a whole new tent that I've never seen before that has like sandbag legs that come out.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we enforce this, to be honest with you, but I was thinking maybe instead of tent size, we do like a square foot of some sort.
Can we stay in sequence so that if we do need to schedule another workshop, we're not out of sequence?
Back at 95.4.
Yeah, we addressed it last time. That's why I was mentioning it.
Okay.
Just interject one thing. Let's call it a shelter instead of a tent.
Yeah, I'll work on the terminology.
Yeah.
A tent
Gets-
is something else that you can move in.
Can I put this picture under the?
The overhead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The city clerk is not here.
Yeah. But I think we've all experienced and received photos. I mean, yeah, no, yes, I saw that.
I think the consensus is we don't want that to happen, correct?
Right.
Okay, so then I'll address it in the language.
Well, and I don't want anybody in the public to misinterpret, we are allowing people to bring equipment to shelter and take protection from the sun. And we're not trying to.
Shade structure, I think is how we should refer to them, because they're all shapes, sizes, kinds.
Right.
Like
Right.
that. Write that down.
We know these past couple of weeks being out on the beach without any shade structure of some sort, you're not there very long.
Yeah. So with the consensus, next section was vending on the beaches.
My only comment there last time was to add something about food.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some of this may be encompassed in commercial operation as well.
Okay.
But no, I will. Hearing no objections, solicitation.
I know we had a schedule for 5:30. Any objections to going till 5:45 to take advantage of as much of the time as we can today?
Good
No
with that.
objection.
Okay,
No
thank you.
objection.
Thank you, Mayor. Solicitation. Any issues with that? Can't solicit on the beach, essentially. A lot of.
Well, it does say that we allow it with a permit.
Correct.
Does the city know, have we issued permits for this?
We actually do have, well, we have solicitation permits in the city.
No, I meant
That
specifically on the
That
beach.
include soliciting on the beach, the last time I checked. So like, even when you solicit anywhere in the city, you need a permit, including on the beach. So it's already encompassed the beach.
So then why did we have another section here, or it's just for clarity?
Well, this is for clarity and to put everything under Chapter 95, specific to beaches. So it doesn't change someone soliciting in a parking lot. But just to be clear, anyone soliciting in the city anywhere is required to get a permit. And we've had that issue come up in code enforcement where people are throwing newspapers and things that people didn't want without a permit, and we've violated them.
So the people standing on the street asking to sign petitions as a voter in Florida should have a solicitation permit? Sorry, I didn't mean to stump me.
No, yes, essentially, although I'm going to have to look at the definition of solicitation. to make sure it encompasses.
For any purpose fall under this, or would that be somewhere else?
A what?
A parade for any purpose fall in this area or somewhere else?
I don't think that's solicitation.
Parade. Yeah, I'm missing,
I'm just not sure, is there any restrictions on parades anywhere? Maybe it's not the appropriate time to ask, but
On the beach? I don't know that we've had parades on the beach.
parades.
Street closures for streets.
Family.
so I will get back to you on that, Vice Mayor.
Now I want to throw one.
Next one is marine turtles. Last time we spoke about this, I believe there was pretty clear consensus that we should do what we can to protect the sea turtles.
I do think I
Go ahead.
want to up some of the turtle lighting language.
Yeah.
Go with the county, I think.
I think that we got an email about there's a proposed regulation on lighting that maybe we could just adopt as part of the ordinance.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So there's two things on that. One is, with regard to the turtle lighting, I guess we would cross-reference that to, the lighting ordinances. And I had emailed a link to a whole write-up about, safe lighting. And then also I emailed a thing about glazing, because there's also turtle glass. And I think in our construction ordinance, we may want to cross-reference the information about turtle glass, and then again have the exclusion, as letting people realize that if they have turtle glass, then they don't need to do the closing of the curtains and so forth. Because if you have turtle glass, then you don't need to worry about closing your shutters. So, if you have turtle lighting, you control it, and if you have turtle glass, you control it. So both of those get good.
That is a good point, thank you.
And to answer your question, they would need a permit. I just looked it up.
Oh,
So
Sunday market? That's an example.
they would need a permit.
Thank you.
Perfect segue. Permit required. 9520. So,
Just to clarify, so on 9519,
Yes.
for the turtles, we're adding language that says either lighting or appropriate glass?
I think we can do
Or
a lot to add
we
to
can do-
this, and
Yeah.
there's some,
the county.
the county's working on one now, but it's going to
Correct.
take a while, but I think we could do something now to get to us to that.
Do we have anything in the Florida statutes, or dare I say Miami-Dade?
I mean,
Or they don't, they seem to be much further along usually with these types of restrictions and ordinances and,
Well, turtles are technically more on this side.
it's DEP. Yeah, we can get some language. So there's a lot of
Collier
administrative.
County or Lee County or any of the other counties that
Yes.
experience.
Yes, we can.
Yep.
And we can reach out to our turtle trackers as well, because they stay pretty up to date.
Yeah, there's actually a model ordinance
Yep.
Okay.
that a lot of the municipalities are using that have older ordinances that
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We okay to move turtles? Okay, permit required.
So don't touch the dunes.
Yep.
And that's always been that way.
Yeah.
And yes, we've had some pretty hefty fines in code enforcement. I know Betty's seen them from people doing things they shouldn't. Dunes are there to protect everyone.
The, just in the last few weeks, I saw something about where it appeared that dunes were being added, where there was a path maybe at some point.
Seen that as well.
Is that part of what's prohibited?
Yes.
Okay,
Disturbing them at all is
so
prohibited.
just don't touch them.
You don't touch them.
Okay.
The sea oats, you don't touch. Anything past the CCCL, you do not touch without a permit.
Okay.
And I've seen excavators going straight through dunes before so that they could have a better view of the beach, and they got fined $5,000 via code enforcement. And so anyone that sees that, please report it.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a consensus there?
On the, sorry. On the recreational activities, I mean, is that any, I mean, I'm trying to understand what's
That came
included.
about because of like the yoga classes, there's some dance classes. To be able to regulate that, there will be a fee schedule that'll align with that as well. But it was that commercial activity, you know.
Organized groups are starting to show up.
Yep. Yeah.
They meet
We're
over
gonna
at Hurley
move-
Park and come across the
Well,
street.
if I remember right, we discussed this one early on. We wanted to be consistent with what we have for parks. 'Cause
Correct.
today, to do it in a park,
Correct.
beach is just an extent, it's the city's property, so same regs, same process.
Yeah, and I
Correct,
may
it just-
actually,
'cause it
Mayor,
says recreational, not commercial activity.
I know, I may actually define, there's gonna be some things that move from, I'm not gonna manipulate too much, but I want it to flow a little bit better, so there's certain things that I'm already making notes are more appropriate in different sections, and then we'll add some definitions of maybe recreational commercial activities, which include, you know, but I mean, I've also heard of people getting picnics delivered on the beach. I mean, there's a lot of commercial activities that people are making money on.
But
So
that's-
this would also address the bike rentals or any, or in a different section with commercial activities?
That's,
Well,
I think
You
that's.
could interpret bicycles as recreational.
Correct.
Just-
So I definitely think a definition is appropriate.
I know we briefly touched on it at the last workshop, but it says that any recreational activity on the beach has to obtain a necessary permit from the city. But are we gonna, or should there be any clarifying language there about whether or not they're on public or private property? Because I think before Jennifer had said that people who like do a yoga class on a hotel property just have permission from the hotel and it falls under their BTR, versus if they're doing it on the public beach where they have to get the permit directly from the city. I don't know if that should be clarified in here in any way, or if that's just understood without being said.
I think we can add public.
I think, well,
Or do you not wanna do
no, I don't think,
No.
I think the idea is anything on the beach should be permitted, right, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Whether that's through
a BTR?
a BTR for an established transient lodging facility, or whether that's through a permit process as the city, we just want to make sure that we are aware of what's going on.
So that could just be understood.
So, I mean, and usually if a business is offering an additional service, they would have to amend their BTR to include that service, right? So some of these pizza shops and stuff over across from County Beach started allowing scooter rentals,
Right.
right? That was added to their BTR
Yeah.
as an additional aspect of their business, similar to what the resorts would do if offering yoga.
And that would also be the same if like one of the condos got together and said, we're gonna hire somebody to teach yoga on our beach, they would also have to get a permit.
Condos aren't businesses, so I don't believe they get a BTR.
So would the person working on their property have to get a BTR or no?
My opinion, as of today, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Any commercial operation on the city needs a permit, whether it's a
Whether it's
BTR
private property.
through a different company or whether it's a BTR on your own.
And I, just because I've seen it, for example, yoga classes that are free, you know, with a donation if you want to or not. Like,
That's why we designated initially commercial and recreational, because
Okay.
we didn't put any language in here about the exchanging of money.
okay,
It's just the activity itself that requires a permit, because essentially you're taking up space on the beach, doing something that other people may not be doing, which is laying back and getting sun.
okay, makes sense.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Because Matthew, you said in your opinion, but in your opinion, whether recreation activities on condos or so forth need a permit, you said in your opinion. So does that mean it's not written, or is it written?
Does it mean it's not written currently in this?
Because when she asked, you know, if a condominium had a business, you know, that they're offering yoga behind their condominium, you said in your opinion, you think that yes, they should have to have a permit because it's a commercial, even though it's on a private condominium. But does that mean it's in the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, so not just.
Well, this
your
isn't
personal
final, no,
opinion.
this isn't final yet, but the intent behind this provision is to require that.
Okay.
Okay, so 9521 is special events on the beach. Is the consensus to allow special events on the beach as long as there's an appropriate permit process? I know it's a pretty general question, but.
No.
Give an example of a special event.
Surfers for Autism.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Surfers for Autism.
Want to have,
They're having their event on the
Have it,
beach
yeah.
this Saturday.
is that a, event, is that a party?
It's an annual event.
Special event.
But is it?
Like a volleyball tournament.
They bring out paddle boards, the kids with autism get out on the boards,
With the volunteers.
volunteers come out.
On the,
On the beach and in the water.
okay, and another example is not, so it's not a wedding, it's a, an
Special event. Beach volleyball.
Is that on a commercial property, on public property?
This year it's at Upland Beach. It's been in Paso Grill for over 10 years.
Okay.
So this is specific to special events on the beach. Special events, Corey Market, right? That's the special event. It's defined in our code already, the word special event. So this is specific to activity on the beach, and you would be required to get a permit.
There's been concerts on the beach, as recently as last year, the year before, special events.
So that would be similar.
Yep.
I don't know if it happens very often,
Yeah, it
but
does.
as long as the consensus is that they should be able to apply and get a permit with some parameters, then we can work on the
Beach
language.
runs, 5Ks. Probably our most permitted.
I'm not trying to nitpick, I just want to know that I understood. Item 4 at the bottom, it said it has to be, compliant with section 9523 below. I just don't know what it refers to, because there is no 9523. So, what was intended there?
Okay, so,
Okay, so Matthew, Assistant City Attorney, can you take a look at that as you rework?
yeah, and so what we did was just so I didn't make any changes from last one, but I have my own version that I'm working on and cleaning up. So, yes, words like city manager will be capitalized. Some of the things we discussed last time will be consistent.
Okay.
And then, yeah,
Still on special events.
Okay. Sorry, Mayor.
And, we had a discussion about alcohol on the beach last time. And, historically, up until 5 years ago, we did not allow for alcohol on the beach altogether. And if you've seen the videos from this past weekend and the weekends before that, and just about every weekend this year, if you've looked at some of the Instagram and other, social channels of some of the businesses that are doing special events and selling alcohol, I mean, they're actively, in my opinion, inviting exactly what we do not want. Which is to have excessive consumption of alcohol, which then just perpetuates the dangerous situation that it creates. I mean, the things that we saw this past weekend in videos and pictures are just absolutely incredible. We survived as a city since we're incorporated in 1957 for 70 years without that on the beach. I think, especially as we look moving forward, I think that's something we need to take into serious consideration, whether we're going to continue to provide permits for that, whether it's special events or otherwise, because it's starting to prove a very significant safety concern, and also goes back to enforcement, right? At what point do we say we have one beach manager and 3 police officers on the beach? At what point do we start hiring more? It's already not being enforced, and so by eliminating one more section that we don't have to enforce and just say, it's all gone. You see anything, it automatically gets enforced, so that nobody has to make any decisions, well, this is a special event, and they just wandered 5 feet outside of this arbitrary line that we designated for today. And a lot of the events that were mentioned are sports activities and so on. They're health-related events, with very, very few exceptions.
what about something like a wedding?
Take it back to where you are having the reception. You're not having the reception on the beach, you're having
Some do.
just a ceremony.
Behind the hotels, they'll have their wedding and reception on
Yeah.
the hotel.
Well, the prohibition, no alcohol on the beach is currently what the code says.
Except
To me,
Except
the
for
problem
special.
comes down to really comes down to enforcement and the bad behavior. We heard some resident just yelled out, it's private, on private property without a permit. That's not allowed. That needs to be enforced. That shouldn't be happening. We have well, I'll use the term cabana zones, that's the current term, that have been designated behind certain commercial properties. They're responsible to keep the alcohol within that zone. That's not happening. That's on that establishment to fix that. If they don't fix it, we have the right to remove that permit. We've talked about this before. So you can tell I'm a little bit frustrated because we continue to talk about enforcement problems. The mechanisms are there. If people do leave, and I was on the beach this weekend, I saw it, or over the holiday weekend, we all saw it, coming with the cups. They had the proper cups from the establishment with the name on it because that's what they're required to do, and then people are just walking down the beach. So we need that second level of enforcement. Yet we also have people in plain label things, but but it all comes down to enforcement. So we tried to, in 2017, I believe it was, say, look, we want to meet and be competitive. I'll call it competitive as we change our alcohol laws. You know, people are not coming. Some people are not coming to our beach. Some people still want to come and have I'll call a responsible alcoholic beverage. But the framework is there and it needs to be enforced. And if it's not being properly administered, we yank the permit. And I guarantee you, if we yank a permit, things will change.
Can I ask a question? I saw a video that had garbage cans filled with boxes of cans of alcohol, which is indicative of not being sold at a venue, but people coming and bringing that beer with them.
And this is my... Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, this is my right hand. You can't see, right? I'm from New York, so I talk with my hands. In the right hand, this overall overarching enforcement. The framework is there. We put a framework in place. No alcohol outside the cabana zone. It's number one on alcohol. It's coming out of the cabana zone. Shame on the permit holders. We need to take action. 2, people are coming onto the other areas of the beach with kegs. Someone pointed out, what they saw in the dumpster, and the pictures we saw from Silver Sands, the piles of bottles and cans. That's a problem. That needs to be, but that's enforcement. We already have an ordinance. No alcohol on the beach.
For not throwing that out when that obviously wasn't even sold by the...
Right.
Brought in from outside.
So it's an overall. Okay, we have people joining our Zoom here.
So it looks like we need more discussion on this topic, and we're already 5 minutes past the 15-minute extension. And I think this is one of the discussion is we're going to need a little bit more discussion to think through some of these issues on how we can deal with either the permits, the special events, and the other cabana alcohol and so on. That's going to be a longer discussion, so I would recommend that we schedule one last workshop in the next 30 days.
Should we discuss some of this at the next beach stewardship workshop, which stewardship meeting, which is about 30 days?
We can look and see if no other dates work. Maybe we can all the commissioners to that meeting as well, or we'll let the city clerk decide how to best address that, whether that date or a different date. Okay. If we do not have any objections, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.